could you repeat the information and explain for chat why over 4 grams of carbohydrates sugar is too much for us and becomes toxic amount? Yeah, that's a very good question. So your normal blood sugar, we have like, blood sugar of 90, 80, 90, something like that, right? Or up to 100 for an average person. That's about 4 grams of glucose. And so that's only 4 grams in the entire circulatory system. And that provides all of the, that's responsible and appropriate for running all the physiological processes of all our tissues in our body and brain. Just 4 grams at any given time. But those glucose molecules are actually, they can cause damage, right? So the up to 4 grams, the benefit outweigh the harm. But those glucose molecules can physically fuse to other molecules. It's called glycation. So it's a non-enzymatic fusion between any carbohydrate molecule, including glucose or fructose, which is actually stronger glycolytic action. And so they fuse to things more aggressively. Fructose does. But all the carbohydrate molecules will when out in their free form. And so we measure this with HbA1c. That's the advanced glycation end product, AGE, of glucose in hemoglobin. And so, but that's a marker of how much damage is happening to the rest of your body, because this is happening at all stages. I mean, if your glucose is 1, you're still causing damage. It's obviously just a very small amount. Your body can contend with this. But it is causing damage. This is what kills diabetics over time, is this chronically elevated blood sugar that is fusing and damaging other molecules and tissues and cells, and they shut down. They can't work. And this is why you lose your toes, and then your feet, and then your legs, and then your kidneys, and then your heart, and then you get Alzheimer's and dementia, and then you go blind and you die. This affects every single system and organ and tissue in your body. It's very harmful. But at what level, right? I mean, so when people have glucose of 120, 140, 150, like on average all the time, they start getting these problems over years. So this is actually toxic at that level. So 4 grams is what we can contend with. But it's all we need in the first place, but it's all we can contend with and safely deal with. You get up 1 extra gram, up to 5 grams in your circulatory system at any given time, chronically over time, or on average. This is a toxic dose. This is toxic to your body, and your body responds to it as a toxin by trying to detoxify it, by elevating your insulin to get that down. It wants to get that below 4 grams because it's toxic above 4 grams. And so you're doing this constantly, and then you need more, and you get insulin resistance. You're requiring more and more insulin to get the same effect and keep that below 4. But it's so important to keep your blood sugar below 4 that you're pumping out more and more insulin as you go. And that's harmful in and of itself, because insulin doesn't just affect energy. They say like, well, your blood sugar goes up and your insulin goes up, and then that puts energy into the cells. So this is a normal process. Yeah, it's normal down here at physiological levels, but then when you start going into super physiological levels, that's abnormal. And if it would be one thing, if it would not be fine, but it would be one thing if your insulin only affected blood sugar. And so you have these spikes in blood sugar, and then you bring those down with insulin. You'd still have something under those spikes. You still have the area under the curve that was causing damage to your body from the glucose. But insulin doesn't only affect blood sugar. Insulin affects over 100 different mechanisms in your body. And so when you raise your insulin to try to detoxify the amount of glucose in your body, you are now out of balance with everything else. And now you're causing physiological stress and metabolic dysfunction in your body because of that. And then you get insulin resistance. Now you have chronically elevated. So now it's not just when you have these spikes that you're causing problems. Now it's always causing problems, always out of balance, right? Your insulin should be under 10 all the time. And now your fasting insulin, not even with a spike, is at 35. And then it spikes up to 75. When you eat something, that's causing huge disruption of your biochemistry and your metabolism and your physiology. It affects all your hormones. It affects, how your body processes hormones, how your body processes energy. Obviously, it affects your blood pressure. It affects your vascular system. It affects so many different things in your body, over 100 different things. And so, look it up. Even on, even Wikipedia, the article on insulin, it's not the best source, but it does have a list of all the different things that insulin affects. You go down and you just look and you see, and you just look at all the different things that insulin affects. You're like, I had no idea. And so when you spike your insulin up, you're knocking all of those things out of balance. So then eventually that's not even enough. You overwhelm your system. You remember, you have 4 grams that you need, and 5 grams is too much. And people are dumping in 400, 500 grams a day, and your body's trying to keep that below 4 grams. And it's just like, what the hell is going on here? So it's very difficult. And eventually your body can't contend with that anymore. And so even though your insulin is 75, fasting, your blood sugar is high too, and you're diabetic. And they're like, ooh, now it's pre-diabetic, and now you're diabetic. Oh, there was a problem, 10, 15 years before that. Your body was starting to get insulin resistance and building up and building up. It was just compensating for it. But it did not come without cost, that compensation. And then eventually you couldn't compensate anymore. Now your blood sugar is getting high. And that's when people start seeing the ramifications of diabetes, the ravages of diabetes. You get diabetic retinopathy, that blood sugar damages the retina. You have all these AGEs that destroy the retina. Now you can't see. It destroys your kidneys and microtubules, and now you can't. Filter urine properly. It starts destroying the vasculature and the nervous system in your limbs, and you start getting peripheral neuropathies, and your hands go numb, and your feet go numb and tingly and painful. And then all of a sudden, you're not getting adequate blood supply to your toes. You start getting infections and ulcers that don't heal. And because of so much blood sugar, this is like bacteria are just teeming, and when normally they wouldn't be as successful, because you're just giving them more glucose as substrate. And now you have these infections that you can't fight off. Parts of your toes die off and get gangrenous. You have to cut your toes off, and then you have to sort of cut half the foot off. Then we have to cut above the ankle, and oh my God, we're going to have to cut up to the knee now. Like, Jesus, now we're going to have to cut above the knee. And that's a much bigger disability when you don't have that hinge in the knee. It's much more difficult to walk, and even with a prosthetic. And then that keeps going up and up and up and up, and you start getting more and more damage. And then your cardiovascular system. Diabetes is one of the biggest risk factors for developing cardiovascular disease and dementia. Alzheimer's is now being called type 3 diabetes. And when we do a PET scan, so a PET CT, when you're looking for cancer, what do? You give them an injection of radio-labeled glucose, and you see where that glucose goes. Right? So you see cancer, right? Potentially. But also the brain will take up a lot of that glucose, but not in Alzheimer's patients. There's a marked decrease in glucose uptake in the brain on PET CT, right? So we know that there's insulin resistance and an inability for sugar and energy to get in the brain in Alzheimer's patients, right? And then you switch them to a ketogenic diet, and that's been shown. And when your ketones go up, those can cross the blood-brain barrier freely, get into the brain, reconstitute into fatty acids, which then regrow the brain, and also provide energy for the brain without insulin. You don't need insulin for that. And so when you do that, it's these people's brains just sort of turn on and they start working a lot better right away. And so high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diets have been shown to be a better treatment for Alzheimer's than every medication ever trialed. So it's actually very important. It's very important to keep your blood sugar at normal levels. It's very important to keep all of your levels at physiological normal levels and allow your body to just get on with things and not screw it up in ways that you think are good, but you really have no idea. It's like whenever you screw with a complicated system, you will get unintended consequences that are generally very bad and that you don't want. So the law of unintended consequences. So you screw with a complex system, you will get very, very strange outcomes. So you just leave it alone. You let the system work the way it's designed to work. we are meant to work a certain way. How do people survive? How do animals survive without micromanaging their biochemistry? Oh, you need to do this and that. No, you don't need to do any of that stuff. You just need to eat what is biologically appropriate and let your body get on with it. So that's what you do. And carbohydrates are not biologically appropriate for humans by any stretch of the imagination. Hey everyone, really happy to announce a new sponsor for the show and for everybody down in Australia, Stockman Steaks, who are delivering high quality grass-fed and finished pasture-raised beef and other meats, flash frozen and vacuum sealed to your door, something that I've been enjoying a lot of myself recently as well. They also have a great range of specialty items such as high-fat keto mince and carnivore beef and organs mince with liver, kidneys, and beef heart as well. So use code Chaffee today for a free order of beef mince or another specialty gift along with your order at stockmansteaks.com.au, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, guys. Emma says, hi, Dr. Chaffee. A friend said when I started Carnivore that if you don't eat carbs, you need to work out. Otherwise, your body will start eating your muscles because there is nothing else to take energy from. Is this true? No, that's absolutely not true. No, that's definitely not true. So, I mean, you get energy from the food that you eat, like meat and fat. So fat is our actual preferred and most abundant energy source, and so that's what your body uses predominantly. And you can convert protein into energy, but this would be from the protein that you're eating, and you can convert that over into energy. But if you're having enough fat, you won't really do this. You'll largely use the fat that you're eating. So no, that doesn't happen. And it's strange that sort of rumor goes around, but there's absolutely no basis in reality for it. In fact, when you're in ketosis and you have ketones available and you have fat available, you will not catabolize your muscles. You won't. You won't use your muscles as energy until you run out of fat, and that's an accusation that I've heard some people that are trying to disparage the ketogenic diet or an animal-based diet. And, oh no, you have to eat plants. Oh my God, because you're going to lose muscle first. Like, no, you don't. One thing that it can look like that if you're all bulked up on carbs, you put on fat and you store fat, and you store fat in your subcutaneous tissue. You also store fat in your muscles, and you store glycogen in your muscles, and then glycogen pulls in water, and so they get puffy and bloated. And so then you stop eating carbohydrates, and all of a sudden your muscles shrink. Oh my God, your body's eating your muscles. No, it's not. It's getting rid of the water weight, the glycogen, and the intramuscular fat. It was never muscle in the first place. It's called myosteatosis. This is a medical term and definition for intramuscular fat. It's like marbling on a cow, on a steak. And it's something we see commonly in medicine. You look at MRIs and you see people with myosteatosis in their muscles. It's a pathological sign. It's not normal. It's not supposed to be there, but it's getting more and more common, and that's it's becoming the norm, but it's not normal. It is pathological. And so that comes from eating carbohydrates or alcohol or those similar sorts of things. And so this is where you see like bodybuilders, they're just bulked up and fat and puffy because they're eating so many carbs. They're like, oh, this is how you get bulky. No, that's how you get fat. And then they do a cutting phase where they just cut out all the carbs and just eating lean protein and things like that. And they're not eating fat, which is more the pity, because they screws up their hormones. They feel wretched, but they're not eating carbs, and so they're eating a lot of lean meat, lean protein, and all of a sudden they're losing all this muscle. No, they're not losing muscle. They're losing the fat, the glycogen, and the water that they stored in their muscles, because they're toxifying their body with all these carbohydrates. And so that's good. It's good riddance to bad company, and so that's not muscle. So no, that is definitely not the case. You don't eat your muscles if you don't eat carbs. I have not eaten carbs in the better part of a decade. I'm more muscular now than when I started. So it's definitely not the case. 70% of all animal species are carnivores. They just eat meat. They're not just lifting. Lions are really emaciated, but herbivores that just eat fibrous plants or predominantly eat fibrous plants, they don't turn that fiber into its constituent glucose molecules. The bacteria in their gut eat the fiber, and as a byproduct, they release fat and protein. And actually, they release fat, and then they die off, and then they're absorbed. The dead bacteria are absorbed as protein. And so, a gorilla may eat a whole bunch of leaves, but what he absorbs is fat and protein, not carbohydrates. And gorillas have muscles. Strange but true, So no, that's completely false. And it doesn't even hold up to even the basic scrutiny. Soy and other sorts of things have these protease inhibitors that blocks protease, or enzyme that breaks down different proteins. And so even if you're eating that with meat, you eat a sandwich that has wheat bread with meat in it, you're not going to absorb as much of the meat protein, even. It's certainly not the plant proteins.